And again, welcome to our webinar today, OpsWorks for Chef Automate, Automation Made Easy. Our presenters today are Kevin Cochran and Nick Rykar. Kevin is a Partner Solutions Architect with AWS, and Nick is a Technical Product Marketing Manager with Chef Automate. Today with us, we're also really excited to have a great team of moderators. We have Michael from AWS, as well as Bonnie and Scott from Chef. They'll act as the webinar moderators who will engage with you and answer any questions you have throughout the presentation. So we're super excited for Kevin and Nick. Kevin, welcome. The floor is now yours to begin.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. I'm Kevin Cochran, Solutions Architect with AWS. And today we're going to show you how OpsWorks for Chef Automate can help make your life easier. You know, no matter what size your organization is, managing infrastructure can be very difficult and downright unwieldy at times, especially the larger it gets. And as more and more organizations are using the cloud, the more important it is to manage your cloud resources efficiently. So, if you want to achieve consistency and ease the burden of maintenance throughout your infrastructure, configuration management is the right tool for the right job. This allows you to focus more on your business strategy and less on managing your infrastructure. So there are three main areas we want to cover today. First is to understand how configuration management lets you refer to your infrastructure as code. Now think about that for a minute. Just like software development, when a piece of code runs, it's going to do the same thing the same way every time. In the same way, when you define your infrastructure as code, you can expect consistency every time you spin up a new resource. Next, we want to show you how AWS can help you use configuration management to save time. And last, we want to help you discover the best practices of setting up your infrastructure, host configuration, and applications. So let's go a little more in depth as to why use configuration management. In the pre-cloud days, infrastructure was static. Scaling required complicated capacity planning and estimates on max utilization, and it was really just a guessing game. But today, scaling can be done dynamically based on actual user traffic. No guessing is required. Also, infrastructure can be provisioned in minutes and sometimes faster. And that's super important because we're in a fast-moving environment where customers expect fast results. So how do you keep up with speed while operating at scale? Well, this is where configuration management really shines. So what exactly is configuration management? Well, let's just read it right off the slide here. It's a practice in which code is used to define and maintain the state of both new and existing resources throughout their entire life cycle. That's from the time the resource is created until it's terminated and everything in between. So just to go over a few practical benefits of configuration management. First, you can store all of your configuration information in one place. So it's like no Word docs or spreadsheets throughout your network. Instead, it's all right here on the management server. And going back to what I mentioned earlier about consistency, you can also make sure that spinning up new resources works the same way every single time. And when it comes to making changes to a set of instances, you can make that change in one place and have it propagate out to all the resources instead of making the change to each individual resource. That's the way we had to do it in the old days. And a huge pain point is when your dev and your test environments don't match your production environments. I'm sure some of you have firsthand experience in dealing with this issue. I know that I have. So let's run through the process real quick. First, you provision your compute resources. And this can be done through CloudFormation or an auto-scaling group. And once your host is up and running, you can automatically configure files, directories, networking, registry keys, users groups, so on and so forth. And now that your OS is configured, you want to set up the application. This includes pulling down application dependencies, application-specific configurations, service registrations, credentials, so on and so forth. So making sure your resources looks the same every single time is pretty awesome, but that's only part of how configuration management can help you. Think about ongoing maintenance, which can be very time-consuming. What about package updates, new application versions, new configurations, deployments? And then, of course, there's environment changes. Or maybe you want to run a command on all the hosts or a subset of hosts. And how do you get in control of all of your resources, especially when there's a lot of them? Again, making sure that your configurations are applied to every web server across multiple environments is a huge challenge. And what about installing and testing an updated package on just a handful of hosts? Or maybe you need to make an LDAP change on every single Amazon EC2 Linux host. Some of you have been doing this for a while, and when you get one of these tasks, you know the time it takes as well as the risks involved. So, to properly manage your infrastructure, you really need the right tool. Chef Automate is one such tool, and that's the one we're going to talk about today. Chef Automate is the latest commercial offering from Chef and handles the configuration management and quite a bit more, actually. Chef Automate allows you to refer to your infrastructure as code, more specifically, Ruby code. It contains cookbooks and recipes, which help you codify your host and application configuration. You can install and configure software components, manage files, deploy and scale applications, and execute other recipes. You can consistently scale your application, whether it's composed of 5 resources or 1,000. It also allows you to maintain the state or policy you define for every resource. For instance, accidental or malicious changes to the state of your resource can be corrected automatically. Chef uses recipes to enforce the policy, bringing the resource back to its original state. You can also save time by automating manual tasks. I mean, why not spend 1 hour automating a 5-minute task that you do 100 times per week? Chef Automate is a simple client-server architecture. The Chef server holds the configuration for how a node should look, and after that node is initially connected, it pulls the configuration information down to the node and applies it. So a quick run-through of how something like this would look. You set up a Chef server with some cookbooks and recipes and some roles. You install the Chef client on an instance or server, and you register that instance with the Chef server as a Chef node and assign that node a role, such as a web server or a database server, something like that. Now, when the Chef client runs, which is 30 minutes by default, it pulls the recipes down from the server and determines which ones it should run based on the role that you've assigned to it. It looks at the instance's configuration, compares that with what the Chef server says it should look like, and that role. So again, the Chef client pulls configuration updates from the Chef server every 30 minutes, and the client will only make changes if the instance is out of spec from its original state. What's really great about Chef Automate is the community support. There's tons of cookbooks and recipes available in the supermarket, and tools like Test Kitchen allow you to fail fast by fully testing your recipes. And of course, there's Chef DK and Knife, which allow you to interact directly with the Chef server. So you take a tool like this and combine it with the power of AWS, and you get OpsWorks for Chef Automate. This product is quite a bit different from OpsWorks stacks, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of those differences today, but I will point out that OpsWorks for Chef Automate is the full Chef Automate software rather than a special implementation. So for instance, with OpsWorks stacks, there is no direct integration with community support. But with OpsWorks for Chef Automate, it works directly with the community support, no differently than if you hosted Chef Automate yourself. So what's the difference? What is different then? Well, OpsWorks for Chef Automate is a fully managed single-tenant Chef Automate server. This means all you need to do is create the server in the AWS console by selecting a handful of options. It's really pretty easy to get started. So once you're logged into AWS console, you can select OpsWorks and then the OpsWorks for Chef Automate option. And there's a button there that says Create Chef Automate Server. Next, you'll see a screen like this. It says OpsWorks for Chef Automate is actually available in US East, Virginia, US West, Oregon, and Ireland. You have 3 sizes to choose from based on your anticipated usage. So a T2 medium for 50 nodes, an M4 large for 200 nodes, and if you have anything more than that, you'll want to select an M4 2X large. Next, you want to select a day and a time that you want any maintenance to occur. This includes security updates and chef upgrades. Then you can also set a backup schedule by selecting the day of the week and a time window. By default, it backs up on a daily basis, and you can keep up to 30 backups. After that, there's really nothing more for you to do. Everything is fully managed from this point. All you need to do is write your cookbooks and recipes and start automating everything you can. In addition to the fully managed service, we also provide scripts which can help you automatically bootstrap your instance to the Chef server. Using auto-scaling groups, you can easily scale your application. There are no separate license fees to pay, and billing is handled through your AWS account. And in AWS fashion, you only pay for what you use. Even though this is all set up within AWS, you can still use nodes located on premises in your own data center. And of course, you get AWS support. So before going to the demo, I just want to recap a couple of highlights. First, consistency. You can make sure that each instance is bootstrapped properly every single time. Next, you can make sure updates to running instances are propagated to all instances of that same role. And you can make sure each instance complies with the predefined policy. And if so desired, Chef can fit nicely into your CI/CD pipeline for delivering software from desktop to production. I know this is all great information, but I'm sure you'd like to see a demo. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nick Rykar to take it from here. Nick?
Hi there. This is Nick coming in from Chef. I think we had some AV difficulties there for a moment, but if all's going well now, you should both hear me and see my desktop. As mentioned, I'm a technical product marketing manager here at Chef, and today I'd like to give you a dime tour of just what you can do with Chef Automate. As mentioned, Automate's going to be giving you some insights into all of the changes that are being applied to your environment. So while we're representing our changes in Chef code, Automate is letting us both store that code as well as provide us with a mechanism to apply it to our servers. What we're actually seeing here is a trend graph of the change over time in our environment. When I've updated my cookbooks, the way Chef stores its policies, as well as when my nodes are being updated and whether those updates are successful or have any issues we need to look at. From this same console, we can take a look at our nodes machine by machine to see exactly what's happening to them every time they check in with Chef. Whatever changes Chef makes are logged here, as well as any resources that are already in their desired state and don't require any updates will also be called out. This way we can be sure that Chef is only making the changes that it needs to make, and we can audit that change by change. Today, though, let's take a look at what applying a change might actually look like. We have our website here, MomCore, where we're going to be selling some printed images of NASA satellite imagery. And one of the things that Chef lets us do is take components that might need to be reused in different parts of our code. Say, for example, the name of our company, and turn them into variables called attributes that we can use across our site. If we take a look at the cookbook that's controlling this, called BJC e-commerce, there we go, we can take a little bit of a look at those recipes and resources as well as attributes that Kevin and I have been talking about. For example, this app is run in Tomcat, and the Chef DSL, or domain-specific language, provides us with these resources for common reuse tasks, like installing packages or creating directories. We can also define those variables mentioned earlier. For example, the reason it says MomCore at the top of my page is that we have that value defined here in my attributes. If we wanted to change that value, I could go ahead and make a change here. And using the tools within the Chef development kit can upload it to our Automate instance. So I can use a tool called Knife to run Knife, Cookbook, Upload, and get that new version of BJC e-commerce I just created up on our site. Talking and typing is like walking and chewing bubblegum. Now that we have our new cookbook uploaded, typically our machines would be configured to check in on a regular interval so that they can pull in those changes once they see they've been applied. In our case, since I don't want to sit around and wait, we're going to go ahead and connect to those machines directly. Knife also has a number of helpful plugins like Knife SSH that I'm using here to connect to any machine that is running the BJC e-commerce recipe. What you'll notice is that I'm not listing a group of machines or a direct host name, but I'm instead querying the Chef server for any of the machines that are using the cookbook I just updated and making sure that all of those machines run Chef Client. What you see scrolling by here is the full log of what Chef's doing on those machines, but thankfully, since we have Chef Automate, we don't need to look at those directly, but can instead take a look at the output of those runs once they complete here in our console. So let's go ahead and see. Looks like our change is almost done. Okay, and we can see it lets us know it finished updating everything in about 34 seconds. And so what I'll see here, first and foremost, is, do I have a site that says Planet Express? I sure do. Even in all the nooks and crannies I might not know about, like down here in the copyright information. If I wanted to see a full summary of what Chef did, though, it's storing that on the Automate server.
When we last met our heroes, we had pushed a change to our site. MomCorp has been officially taken over by Planet Express. And if I hop back into the Automate console, I can see the specific actions that Chef took. For example, I can see that in response to having to restore a new backup from the changes I made, it went ahead and restarted the Tomcat service during the run. Now, this is just a part of what we can do with Chef. One of the nice things here is, since we reference not just a specific machine, but any machine that had that BJC e-commerce cookbook in its website, anything running BJC e-commerce, actually run search, there we go, has that updated code. For example, this machine, e-com acceptance, we can see also got an update at the same time my previous node did. And indeed, on the node summary screen, we can see that all 4 of these machines got an update 7 minutes ago. So, what else can we do here in this console? One of the neat things about Chef Automate is it's not just allowing us to define how we want to create and change our nodes, but also whether or not those nodes are in compliance with whatever our requirements are as an organization. This can, of course, mean things like formal compliance regulations, things like PCI, HIPAA, et cetera, or just an assurance that whatever our own requirements are for code release are what's actually being applied here. So, for example, here we can see that while I've been deploying my changes successfully to my machine, this compliance status view is showing me I might still have some problems that need solving. If we dive in here, instead of seeing the changes that Chef has made, we can see what tests Chef is running against this machine. And in particular, of those, how many are failing and what's the nature of those failures. Here what we can see are that we're actually checking these machines to ensure that we are using secure SSL protocols. Since this is a storefront, I want to make sure my customers can trust me with sensitive data. However, what we note here is that I have a rule letting me know that I am currently allowing SSL-free traffic. If you're not familiar with what that means, it means I might be vulnerable to a vulnerability called Poodle. So this is a way that we can go beyond just ensuring that we've successfully configured a machine, but make sure that that configuration is adherent with our requirements. Here we can see that I have a service called Apache running on port 443 with SSL enabled and not securely enough set up. The same way that I was able to push a content change to my machines with Chef, so too can I push a configuration change to try to address this problem. Now, don't worry, we're not going to cover the details of how one configures SSL in Apache. Thankfully, I'm already setting up this SSL configuration via a template. Because this is a demo, I get to cheat and have my fix already preloaded and just comment out. In short, if my problem is that SSL is not restricted enough, I need to be more explicit with how I'm setting up SSL. Just like before, I can go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. Upload my change to the Chef server, which is a part of this instance. So let's go ahead and run that same nice cookbook upload. And this time around, since I want to first make sure that I haven't done anything that might impact my user base, rather than upload this or run it everywhere, I can choose to run it just within a single environment within Chef. In this case, I have an acceptance environment where I can evaluate changes before I start evaluating them in my other environment. Just as before, rather than referencing machines directly, I'm instead creating the criteria I want to ask the Chef server for. And Chef server is going to run on only the machines that match that criteria, rather than Chef client is going to run. When this completes, and we see in the background here a little bit of information of the things Chef is changing, but again, we'll be able to review this all within the Automate console. And when all is said and done, should be able to come in here, take a look back at the converged status of my machine. Go back to all my machines. There we go. And I can see that acceptance just ran a few seconds ago. If I take a look at what changes Chef made, I can even confirm that it properly applied the change to my config file and triggered a restart of the underlying service so that that new config file gets pulled in. But most importantly, I can answer the question, did I actually solve my problem? Yes, I did. Now when we run our scans, which happens every time this machine checks in, I can see that all of my SSL requirements are now being adhered to. I can still review those previous scans if I want to see the history of the audit on this machine. But I can see now that it looks like this change is properly applied. And of course, if I wanted to actually do some due diligence and pull up my acceptance page, make sure everything's loading up properly, I can do before taking that change to the rest of my fleet. So while there are a lot of permutations of the way we can use Chef here, ultimately what it comes down to is, if we understand the requirements for our environment, what's required to install software and what's required to validate that those installations have been successful and adhere to our best practices, we can represent those in code. Here we're seeing Chef code in those compliance scans was what's called inspect code, another Chef DSL that can be used in tandem with Automate to give us information about our environment. And evidently, I still have Slack with it. If we dive back in here, we can also see everything Chef knows about our system. So while, as Ken mentioned, there isn't a difference in the Automate software platform itself, of course, we are partnered with AWS, and our tooling works better together. you'll actually be able to see here, when I flip into this attributes view, I have the ability to see everything Chef knows about every individual machine it's managing. This is where I was able to find things like which machines are running DJT Commerce and what settings are being set for it, but also some system profiling information that's automatically collected every time Chef runs. This includes information like our IP address, operating system, memory, and CPU. But also, since we're on Amazon, it will also let me know some of the Amazon specific about my machine. What AMI was used to spin it up, instance type, public IPv4, all of those that might not be directly queryable otherwise. That concludes the live demonstration for today, and we'd love to dive into some Q&A and answer any questions that you might have about the platform.
Yeah, thanks again, Nick, for doing the demo. Super awesome. So how do you get started? We've got a few links for you to click on here to go grab some cookbooks. It'll be great to look at the supermarket and see what's available out there, anywhere from MySQL, PHP, Java, tons of Windows cookbooks. So this works on both Windows and Linux, so you can actually use just about anything that you need to using Chef. You can learn more by going to the Chef website at www.chef.io. And if you want to learn more about using OpsWorks, go to aws.amazon.com/OpsWorks. And that does conclude today's presentation. So yeah, now we're going to move on to answer a few questions. So let's go to a couple of them that we haven't answered just yet.
Thanks so much. We're going to head over to our live Q&A here momentarily. Thank you again, everyone, for listening during the technical difficulty issues that we did have. We apologize for that. That'll happen sometimes, as we all know, working with technology. So thank you so much for hanging on with us. We're really excited to get to some of the user questions here. Again, I wanted to send out a reminder that we will be sending out a recording of this, as well as the slide deck here, the slide deck momentarily, so look in the Q&A pod for that. Additionally, please do submit any feedback that you have on the screen now on the polls. We look forward to receiving that feedback and sending it off to the presentation team. So again, we're going to get started here with a couple of questions momentarily from some of our attendees.
Hey, again, Kevin here. Yeah, so let's start off with, and I'm sorry if I get the name wrong here, but I've got a question here from Alanafe Matinda. Question is it safe to do this on database servers? This seems okay on static servers like web applications, etc. The answer is yes, you can. There's actually cookbooks out there for the most popular database servers out there, so you can actually maintain your database servers using Chef. So yeah, get out there and start working on that and start playing around with it. It'd be great. Next question is, not sure who this one's from. It looks like it might be Rahul. So the question is, how do I register nodes with the Chef server? So I think I partially answered this earlier, but I'll go and give a little bit more of a thorough answer, is when you spin up a new Chef Automate instance within AWS, as it's creating everything, resources, you have about 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes to download your private keys, your keys for the instance, as well as the starter kit. If for whatever reason you click start and you walk away and you miss that screen, no problem. Just go ahead and terminate that instance of your Chef Automate server and spin it back up again so you have time to get those keys. You can't actually download the starter kit or the keys after that screen has gone away. So once you have the starter kit, that's where you'll actually have the user data.sh where it shows you how to connect. And a lot of times you can actually just run that directly from a Linux instance and it'll automatically bootstrap with the server. So everything is actually populated in that userdata.sh file. So it makes it really easy to do that. The on-premises servers do require that you install the Chef Client Agent software and register the server with your Chef server. But you would want to use, if you don't have a VPN or direct connect, you'll need to make sure that you have visibility to your Chef server. Next question. This is from Maggie Thull. And the question is, are Chef users managed through IAM? Chef users are not managed through IAM. They actually must be provisioned from within Chef Automate. So there isn't really much of a link there between the two at this time. Another question from Rachna. Does AWS Support cover OpsWorks for Chef Automate? Absolutely. Yes, and you can run on over to the OpsWorks in AWS on our website. You can actually run over to the AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate page to learn more about the support options. But yes, we do fully support the operation of the Chef server itself and registering nodes and all those pieces that come along with it. So yes. Another question from Rachna. How can I tell which resources in my account are managed by my OpsWorks for Chef Automate server? So when you spin up a new OpsWorks for Chef Automate, you actually can see the server in your EC2 instances list. All of your instances are tagged, but interestingly enough, you can actually terminate on your own. You can actually terminate your Chef Automate server. I would highly recommend not doing that. If you do need to tear down your Chef Automate server, do that through the OpsWorks for Chef Automate console. But you do have resources that are tagged so that you can get visibility into all of your Chef Automate resources. Okay, another question here from Rizwan Ali. Can you use Chef Automate to manage Windows boxes? Absolutely. In fact, Chef has a great relationship with Microsoft and actually manages Windows boxes very well, including even PowerShell, DSC, DCS, I can't remember, I always get that backwards, but you can actually manage it quite well. And that includes even Java cookbooks and things like that as well. So absolutely. And let me see if I have any other questions here to answer. It looks like we have another question here from John Cronin. Before one initiates a change, is there a way to evaluate the extent and magnitude of the change? Can a change be limited to a subset of critical systems and done in phases? Yes, absolutely. This is a great use of environments so that you can actually pinpoint specific systems within your infrastructure that you want to use specific cookbooks. So you actually can version your cookbook. So you may have a number of systems in your test or your dev environment. Maybe for the most part they all look identical, but they have a different environment name. But those environments have all the same cookbooks and recipes. So you can actually take one of those environments that you want to kind of be your test bed and just change the version in that one and run everything. And that way you can actually see what changes take place and manage any kind of issues that might come from there. Another question. When we are moving towards microservices environments with Docker, I wanted to know what would be the best use case to use Chef, and what are the fundamental differences between Chef and Docker? Sorry, this question was asked by Subhajit Ghosh. Sorry if I got the name wrong, but hopefully I got that right. The answer is you can utilize Chef to configure and manage your Docker hosts and ensure that there's any required containers or pre-downloads, things like that. There's a community cookbook. You can look that up at supermarket.chef.io. The direct link is going to be supermarket.chef.io/cookbooks/Docker, and that will help you manage your containers. Another question here from Marco Castillo. Can Chef perform bare metal installs? Answer is absolutely. It can be used for on-prem installs. Of course, you don't have that option in AWS, as we use AMIs and provide you with operating systems, but you can do that for on-prem installs.